Hi, I'm your host Vasco Duarte. Welcome to the Scrum Master Toolbox podcast, where we share tips and tricks from Scrum Masters around the world. Every day, we bring you inspiring answers to important questions that all Scrum Masters face day after day. Hello everybody, welcome to our Wednesday Leading Change episode this week with Paddy Corry. Hi Paddy, welcome back.
Hey Vasco, glad to be here.
So Paddy, on Wednesdays we want to dive into our role as Scrum Masters in the role of change agents. And of course, we handle all kinds of changes. We are part of a change, which is the constant improvement that we hope to help teams go through. But we're also part of wider changes like agile adoption or DevOps, cultural transformations, or it might be even an individual change like ourselves or somebody else in the team that needs to go through a personal change process. And we do this because we understand that change is one of the things we work with every day. We want to explore what you've learned, Paddy, when it comes to that. So share with us a story of a change process you were involved with and walk us through the story and at the same time highlight the tools, the tips, the tricks, the techniques you learned back then that you still apply today.
Sure. Well, I'll tell a long story that starts very small. And maybe I'll share just a little bit of context about where this kind of change came from. So I was working in a very distributed environment. So this is pre-COVID, when we're all distributed in the times of the pandemic. But the context I was working in was a team that was located in different regions, different areas, many people in one location, but a number of others in different locations. So overall, the team was fully distributed across a few different places. We were experimenting with an instant messaging tool called Slack on a very small scale. By that, I was using it to converse with the guys who weren't in the Dublin office. We had a bit of interest in it from the team that we were in and also from another team that we worked with. And in actual fact, our customer who we work with used the tool also, Slack. And in terms of communicating with people in different locations, it seemed to be kind of valuable. It seemed to be kind of useful. So I asked in a community of practice whether we should consider an experiment on a wider scale. And we started gathering information that the tool was already in use in a small scale in lots of different pockets around the organization. So we started communicating with those different groups that were trying it. It gradually became clear that it was an interesting way to start talking about cross-team dependencies in a distributed context. We started building up a bit of an idea of the value that we could get from using this. And I was reminded when I thought about this story of a quote from Henrik Knyberg when he has a talk about change agency. And he says, it's a bit like pulling strings. As a change agent, you might think you have an idea of the right change to make, but when you pull the string, you get resistance, and there's something telling you that it's actually not the right string to pull. On other occasions, you might pull the string and suddenly it just completely unravels and you're getting an awful lot of feedback telling you, yeah, follow this one. And this was one of those instances. If you fast forward 3 months later, it became an organization-wide adoption of the tool, and I was giving training to every stakeholder in the organization. A learning experience for me in that context was stakeholders matter. I remember one particular training course on Slack where I was discussing it from the perspective of HR, compliance, and security all at the same time. It was a very challenging conversation, but a great learning experience. And in that role of change agent, I became the kind of representative of the tool, bizarrely. So my identity in that context was the representative of Slack. I was really trying to represent the value, and the stakeholders were trying to represent their potential risks or their potential challenges, while also seeing the value themselves as well. So it was a huge learning experience about the context of the organization, how change happened, and how to, I suppose, experiment, and get feedback.
Absolutely. Well, when you look back at that story, like what were perhaps some of the things that kind of triggered an evolution of the adoption of that tool? Like what, was there a specific moment? Was there a specific approach, a specific string, as you were talking about it, that you pulled that actually started having an impact? Because I'm pretty sure that right now, especially for those that are stuck at home because of the lockdowns all over the world, they might be asking themselves, how do I help my team adopt a tool like Slack?
And I guess to answer the question, I'm thinking about the context more than anything else, and how in this instance, I was probably unaware of how ready the context of the organization was for a tool like this. So one of the big pushbacks I initially got from talking about Slack was, we already have other tools. Tell us why we should think about this one. And it's a very human feeling, I think, like, why do we have multiple things for the same job? But once we understood the value proposition was how we described it, that, other tools help with communication inside a team. This one is about communication across team boundaries. So we can swarm on problems by joining a channel. It doesn't matter what location we're in. We can set up specific channels that are long-lived for dependencies between two teams. So if two teams work together quite a lot, let's set up a channel. Team A, Team B, members of each team join the channel. We just have a quick chat every time we have a dependency. And once we had those patterns that we could demonstrate value from, it became very easy to, show the benefits. And I think the other thing that really surprised me and that really helped was gather data. Find a way to show how these tools are being used. So we're talking about a tool here, right? But evidence and data really matters. So we were able to say to a manager who thought that another tool, Microsoft Teams, was already in wide use, no, we actually have the data. It's very low. It's not high usage at all. And even just in having these conversations about the value proposition of Slack, we've seen the data, the member usage, regular daily usage has grown from X to Y over the last 30 days. And once we could show the usage of the Slack tool spiking without even an investment, there was significant interest.
Without asking anyone to do it, right? That's an important.
Yes, just by spreading the word about it. Have you seen the value that it can give you in our contexts?
So one of the things that comes to my mind in these stories is that very often change processes are about finding what already works and kind of trying to amplify that. And the story you just related of, this tool being adopted by people without being quote unquote trained to use the tool. It sounds like one of those, right? You really, as far as I understand, you found an attractor, something that was pushing people to select a certain tool, take a certain set of actions, and then you just amplified that. Is that how you see it?
100%. And, another way of putting it is like the organization had already been developing this muscle, and, we just put the right thing in its hand that it needed to lift, and that was it. Similar to remote working practices, I think the organizations that have adjusted in times of COVID very fast, they were already developing those muscles. The distributed teams, the ways of working, the tools, all of those things were probably already in use in the organizations that have adjusted well. So they developed the muscle first before they had to use it.
Yeah, absolutely. It's one of the questions that I think all Scrum Masters should ask themselves when in the midst of a change process is, what are the actions, the attitudes, the things we are doing that are already happening and support the change that we are trying to implement? That's a very powerful question.
Yes, I think that's definitely true.
Thank you for the story, Paddy.
My pleasure.
Leading change is one of the core skills we must acquire, but it is only one of the steps towards our success as Scrum Masters. Tomorrow, on Success Thursday, we will talk about how to define success for the Scrum Master role, we'll cover tips on how to measure your way to that position, and most importantly, how to develop that focus on continuous improvement that is as important for Scrum Masters as it is for teams. See you tomorrow. We really hope you liked our show. And if you did, why not rate this podcast on Stitcher or iTunes? Share this podcast and let other Scrum Masters know about this valuable resource for their work. Remember that sharing is caring.